Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm starting off my brand new reactions to Midnight Tales channel. As you guys recall, a while back I made a short saying that I'll be reacting to his channel now. I figured, New Year, react to something different, right? Well, the first video I'll react to of his is 5 creepy true walking at night horror stories. Without further ado, I'm going to turn the lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag. Okie dokie, here we go.
It was late summer, and I was coming home from hanging out at the beach for my best friend Mia's birthday party.
Okay.
When I got off the subway at my stop, I checked the bus arrival screen. The bus I would normally take home was arriving in an hour. Being a tired 14-year-old girl, I decided to take an alternate bus route home. This was a decision I would later regret. When I got off the bus at the stop, I had about a 10-minute walk to my building. My area at night is pretty quiet, with not many cars on the streets. As I was walking up the street, I heard the sound of an engine nearby. I looked over my left shoulder and saw a white panel van, I know, how typical, rolling up the street. I tried to think nothing of it, but when I turned onto my street, the van did too. Now I was unsettled and started walking faster. This van was driving slowly, and it never passed me. When I turned up the long driveway to my building, the van once again turned too. Now I was scared. The driveway to my building has an ice rink on the side of it, with bright lights, so I walked beside the rink under the bright lights. There are small townhouses on the other side of this driveway. The van caught up to me and stopped. I thought maybe this person was lost and trying to ask for directions.
No, they're not lost trying to get directions. They're following you because they probably want to know where you live and probably kidnap you. I would have been trying to find a dark alleyway so they wouldn't follow me and then wait for them to pass me by and then go.
I was trying to find some way to rationalize this. I stopped and stayed about 4 feet from the van just in case. I looked in the van window to see an older man, starting to bald, with black hair and a white t-shirt. I asked if he was lost, but he didn't respond. Instead, he tried to get me into his van. I said no and started walking, but the van continued to drive slowly, following me. When a red car began to drive down the driveway, the van drove all the way to the end of the driveway and waited for the red car to turn out before reversing to be beside me again. The man was still trying to get me into the van. I wanted to make a mad dash to my building, but I was worried he would see where I lived. So I kept walking. When another car came down the driveway, the van did what it did before, driving to the end and waiting for the car to leave. But this time, there was a cab dropping someone off at the townhouses. The cabbie was closing his trunk when he saw me. "Are you okay?" he asked. I told him how the van had been following me, and every time a car came, the van drove to the end and waited for it to leave before following me again. The cabbie told me he would get in his car, drive to the end of the driveway, and sit there for a bit so I would have enough time to run to my building. I told him okay, and thanked him. The van was back in line with me again, so the cabbie got in his cab and drove up the driveway, and the van followed. I looked and saw the 2 vehicles sitting there. I ran up the rest of the driveway into my building's lobby. My heart was racing. When I got to my apartment, I was still freaked out. I went into my room and called the cops. While I was on the phone with the cops, I looked out my bedroom window and saw the van. It was slowly driving around my building, looking for me. Now I was fully panicking. The cops sent officers to sweep the area, but they didn't find him. 2 officers came to my apartment to get a statement from me. About a week after this happened, the officers came back to my apartment. They showed me a photo of the man from the van that they were able to get from the security camera on the side of my building. I told them the man in the photo was the one who followed me. They told me they found him and that he was being put on the sex offender list.
Well, I'm glad they found him, but I would not only put him on the sex offender list, but I would also put him in jail.
I'm 5'7", 113 pounds, and I was 16 at the time of this encounter. I'm a multi-sport athlete: track, handball, volleyball, basketball, and hockey.
Whoa, that's a lot of sports. I can't even imagine myself trying to stay fit for all these activities. Imagine multitasking each one, Geez. Anyway, let's continue with the story.
And I have insomnia. This all happened around 2 a.m. on August 10th, 2019. I had been over at my best friend's place because she had just returned home from a vacation and had birthday presents for me. Hoodies and gummies, if you're curious. I had spent almost an hour there already and wanted to head back home soon because honestly, my town is scary at night. Drug dealers, rapists, murderers, you know the deal.
Yeah, that's one town I do not want to live in. I'll be trying to get back to my house ASAP before the violence starts kicking up.
So I waved goodbye to my best friend and started walking down her street. I guess a party had just let out because behind me, at the end of the road, about 20 or 30 yards from where I was standing, there were a couple of men walking across the crosswalk. They were both pretty tall. I'm guessing between 5'11" and 6'3". The two seemed harmless at first when I looked in their direction, but soon they came to a stop. They were both looking at me. At this point, I felt uncomfortable, so I just kept walking. That's when I overheard what one of them said. "Hey, that's a girl." At this, I whipped my head around. They were starting to walk in my direction now, and one of the two men had moved over toward the sidewalk, where there was no light. I knew at this point that something wasn't right, and I began to pick up my pace. They were still getting closer. I didn't know where the second guy was, but when I looked back, the first guy was still following me down the middle of the road. I think they were planning to cut me off and try to trap me between the two of them. The minute I was about 13 yards from the T intersection, I started to run, and that's when the yelling started. "Oh great, now she's running." I hooked a sharp right and then a left. I could still hear them behind me, and at this point, all I knew was that I couldn't stop moving. I had to lose them somehow. I was coming up to an apartment building with a small parking lot behind it. There were no lights. I made the split-second decision to veer off into the parking lot, and I squeezed myself under one of the cars. I don't know how long I waited there. It could have been a minute, but it felt like a lifetime. I watched the two men run past. They didn't bother to check under the cars, which was definitely in my favor. The minute I felt that I was safe, I backtracked and took a different route home. I was too scared to take the main route, fearing I would bump into them. I know what I'm about to say is stupid, but I didn't go to the police. I wouldn't have been able to give a proper description of the men because I hadn't seen their faces. If there's anything I learned from my experience, it's that no matter who you are, you need to be extremely careful. You might think that the part of town or city you live in is safe, but that really isn't the case. There is no protective barrier to keep out people with bad intentions. Please, whatever you do, watch your surroundings as if your life depends on it. If I had been listening to my music and not paying attention, I hate to think what could have happened to me. I hope no one else has to experience the fear that I did. It was almost like prey being chased by predators.
When they said, "Hey, it's a girl," I knew in the moment it was sounded more like, two people that might want to, I hate to even say the word, but, rape her. But she did the right thing and not having her earbuds in and just bolting. And hiding under the cars was a good idea. Glad the car alarms didn't go off because then they probably would have found her. But you did not go to the cops. I would have still gone and gave them a statement anyway and be like, just to let them know that them guys were in the area. So it'd be like, keep a lookout. because you never know that somebody else could have got caught between them two. I tell you, this world is full of some sick-minded individuals.
About 2 years ago, I moved from my college town in Arizona to Woodland Hills, California, for a new job. I was 21 and living alone in a studio apartment within 2 blocks of an outdoor mall and gym. The apartments were older, built in the mid-70s, well maintained with a fence, cameras around the entire complex, and gated entrances. It was a fairly nice area, mostly young professionals and families, and it felt pretty safe.
I'm glad they were able to keep this place maintained instead of like tearing it down and starting over. Because even though if a building looks decrepit, it could still be safe as long as people put the right proper security measures in, you know what I mean?
However, after this incident, I refused to walk to my apartment complex alone after dark. One night, I decided to take a walk after my workout. It was barely nightfall and still fairly warm. I grabbed my water bottle and started walking past the gym in the opposite direction of my apartment. I walked for a little while, turned around, and started heading back home. That's when I noticed a white Escalade with completely blacked out windows that had passed me earlier pass by again. They drove down to the light and made the turn, so I thought nothing of it. But when I saw the car for a third time, I started to panic. By this point, it was well past dark, and most people were heading home from the gym and the outdoor mall. I was still a few blocks from the gym, and the car kept driving past, slowing down, and speeding back up if they saw anyone around. I cut through a parking lot to try to get to the closest open store, a McDonald's. Before I knew it, the Escalade was back and in the parking lot, between me and the McDonald's. The car started slowly circling the parking lot, and the windows rolled down part way to reveal 3 men in their 30s or 40s just staring at me. At that point, I was frozen and decided to stand under a light by a closed store while frantically trying to call my friend from the apartment complex to come get me, my mom, friends from other states, anyone, so I wasn't alone. The Escalade kept circling, slowing down to barely an idle every time they passed me. I saw the door of McDonald's open, and a younger guy came out, clearly done with his shift, and headed to his car. I started yelling for him to wait, telling him I needed help, and I took off running towards him. The Escalade sped out of the parking lot, back to the nearest light, and turned again. I apologized to the younger guy for scaring him, and asked if he could please walk me to my gym, thinking the men were probably gone, and I could wait a few minutes there before walking back to my apartment. We got to the gym, and he made sure I felt safe there before heading back to his car. I waited for 10 minutes, still trying to reach my friend who lived in my complex so he could come get me. I wasn't able to get a reply from him, so I called one of my girlfriends from back home to talk to.
Thank you, McDonald's employee. He probably saved her from a dangerous situation right then and there, but it may not be over just yet. And plus, they raised the windows down. I'll be like, what do you want? You guys are just following me nonstop. Are you lost or something or what? But if they come out trying to grab me, I'll be like, oh, that's it. I'm out of here. Call the cops.
And started walking the rest of the way home. I got past the main intersection before the car turned down my road and started following me again. My heart sank, and I had a horrible feeling that if I didn't get inside the gate before they got to me, I'd never be seen again.
Oh, they're not done with you yet. They wanted to see if you were like in a vulnerable position again to keep on following you. But then also, they're going to follow you home too. Oh boy, this ain't good. Like I said earlier, I'll be calling the cops right then and there.
I broke into a sprint and screamed into my phone that I was being followed and told my friend not to hang up. The gate had just started to close behind another resident's car, and I barreled through it, sprinting the full way back to my apartment and locking the door. About 3 hours later, I went to take my dog out before bed, and out of curiosity, or sheer stupidity, I walked back towards the gate I had run through, still safe within the fence. I saw the Escalade parked on the other side of the road, waiting just outside the camera's field of view. I calmly turned and walked my dog on the interior of the apartment complex, out of their sight. They came back to the same spot every night for several days, and then I never saw them again.
Hold on. They did all that just to scare you, and they did not even try to get in somehow? But I'm glad they didn't, because this would have been a heart-pounding story to hear. Her going through a traumatic ordeal with these guys. But, man, I'll be trying to get the cops involved and see if they can get any footage of, like, the Cadillac Escalade and also the license plate if possible. They might be able to catch it.
I live in a farming area with lots of fields and woodlands, so it's not hard to find places to walk my dogs off their leashes. About 2 years ago, one evening, I completely forgot to walk them. It was around 8:30 p.m., and it was the October half-term, so it was already dark. I wasn't too bothered because I know the whole area really well. I took my large female boxer dog, who was only a puppy at the time but had insane muscle and was already fully grown in height, and my Chihuahua Jack Russell mix out. I'm a 5'5" girl with quite a bit of muscle on me since I did a lot of physical sports, including martial arts, so I felt capable of protecting myself in a fight. Because of this, I thought I didn't need a torch and believed I was safe. I began walking out of my estate and up a hill, with my earphones playing some heavy metal music to get me in the zone for a quick walk on the back fields, and then back home. When I reached the top of the hill, which led to another housing estate bordering the fields, I noticed there was no traffic at all, no movement. By this point, it was almost 9 p.m., and there was nobody to be seen, which I thought was unusual because it's a well-populated area. Despite this, I carried on walking, with my little crossbreed biting at the leash with excitement, and my boxer trying to attack my shadow. Once we reached the fields, it was almost pitch black. There were no lampposts, and the only light was from the houses that faced the field. I took my boxer off her leash, and as boxers do, she bounded off into the tall grass like a child.
Now, I'm all right living in a rural area, but if there ain't no power poles that have lamp posts on it in the direction I'm walking, then I ain't going down that particular road without any source of light, because you never know what animal or crazy person could just like come out of nowhere. Wonder why her dog ran off like that. Maybe she must have sensed something.
While my little mutt followed at my heels, nipping at my jeans to remind me he was still there. After about 5 minutes, my eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and I could see my boxer had stopped a meter ahead of me, staring at something. Instantly, my Jack Russell mix started growling and stood between my legs. I looked up to see a figure standing about 3 meters away from me. I shouted for my boxer to come back to me, as she usually gets too friendly with strangers and jumps on them. Reluctantly, she turned to me and began running towards me, my eyes never leaving the figure. I called out and apologized for my dogs, saying something like, "Sorry, she's only a pup. She thinks everyone wants to play." But there was nothing, just silence from the figure. I could see they had long hair and what looked like a long raincoat. The shoulders were wide, but I still thought it was a woman. Once again, I called out, "Are you okay? Did she jump on you?" Again, nothing. At this point, I could feel her eyes on me and my dogs. My littlest dog began barking and squealing, and my boxer started barking this horrifying bark I had never heard from her before.
This is one of them people you should not be talking to. I mean, if they're not there to walk down the road for exercise, why would they be hiding in a field wearing a raincoat and it ain't even raining? So yeah, don't even acknowledge that person. Just try to calmly walk away, but if they start chasing you, that's when you'd be like, "I'm calling the cops."
It sounded like she was trying to threaten the figure. Then, I heard the woman begin laughing malevolently. That's when I lost it. I picked up my little dog and ran, knowing full well my boxer would follow me. As I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of sports, so I'm fast and have decent stamina. I jumped over the gate with my dog in my arms and my boxer right behind me. I glanced over my shoulder and saw the woman clear as day, in full pursuit. I couldn't give you exact details, but she looked like something straight out of a horror movie. She was grotesque in every sense of the word. At this point, my boxer was running just a little ahead of me. She knew I was running home and that this woman was bad news. She could have bolted, but for whatever reason, she kept a speed that matched mine. Maybe it's the dog's loyal instinct to protect the pack or something. I don't know. Anyway, by the time I reached the end of the first estate, I slowed down to look behind me. Big mistake. She was still there, running, quite a distance behind me, but she was coming. At this point, my head was complete mush, but I knew that if I went back the way I came from, she would catch up to me. So I darted to the left at the end of the estate and ran across the road down the street, my boxer right by my side. By now, my mutt had gone silent and was digging his paws into my arm and chest. I ran like I'd never run before. At the end of the street, I turned right, which brought me onto a street next to the entrance of my estate. I didn't look behind me until I reached my driveway. I put my mutt down, and he ran with my boxer to the front door of my house. I looked behind me. She wasn't there, but I could hear her laughing. So, I ran to the door, opened it, and slammed it behind me, then bolted it shut. I turned off the porch light and peered out the little window of the door. She walked straight past the end of my driveway. She hadn't seen me. I told my older sister what happened, and she told me it was best not to tell our dad, as he probably wouldn't let me walk them alone again. Ever since that night, I rarely forget to walk my dogs before it gets dark out. And when I do, I make sure to walk them first thing in the morning afterward.
First of all, I'm glad that girl was able to get home safely. But yeah, that would make me have cramps in my legs if I try to outrun somebody that's crazy in the head, you know. And plus, I don't want them to figure out where I live. But I'm glad that crazy person never did figure out where she went. Sounds like that person needs to be in a mental hospital. But I'll be getting like the sheriff's department out there at least, just trying to go find that girl and see if they could get her off the streets, you know.
This happened back in early 2015. I was a 19-year-old guy living in a rather rough area of Portland, Oregon. Although there were occasionally some belligerent homeless people and drug addicts, violent muggings were very rare, and most of the city felt very safe, even at night. One of my best friends turned 21, and we decided to go bar hopping and then clubbing. I was in a group of about a dozen people, 3 of whom were my roommates. Unfortunately for me, I was the only one in my group who was either under the legal drinking age or didn't have a fake ID. This meant I was unable to enter the bar. However, to my luck, there was a nice Mediterranean restaurant right across the street from the bar, which I ended up going to. I stayed there for more than an hour and then was ready to leave. I had done that walk many times, even at night, so I was never scared. Until this night, of course. My roommates had taken an Uber to the bar from our apartment, which meant I would have to walk back since I didn't have Uber and my phone battery was running low. The distance back to my apartment was about 3 miles. It was already close to midnight, and I would be reaching my apartment around 1 a.m. I decided to walk the distance anyway, thinking it would be good exercise since I hadn't been to the gym lately. I began my walk and passed by lots of drunks. Even though some of them shouted things at me, I never felt unsafe or threatened, so I was okay. However, the last mile to my apartment was through a darkly lit park that could be scary at night. Not because of crime, but because there was only one streetlight along that stretch of road. I reached this somewhat creepy area around 12:30 a.m. As I descended down the dark and narrow street, I noticed a black Chevy Silverado speed past me, and then slow down after it had passed. The truck almost came to a stop, but then decided to drive ahead. I shrugged it off at first, but this is where things started to get creepy. After I walked nearly a quarter mile further, the Chevy Silverado came from the opposite direction and did the same thing. When the truck slowed down and almost came to a halt, I began to panic but didn't openly show it. I pretended to ignore the vehicle, but my instincts told me something was not right.
This is why you should not go down sketchy walkways with hardly any light, because you never know, somebody be passing you and stopping and turning around. They're pretty much scoping this girl out. Oh boy, she needs to hurry up and get out of there. Go.
The truck then started to proceed, but this time, I couldn't keep calm. I was now in the middle of a dark and isolated park with no streetlights, and there likely wouldn't be a single person in sight. After walking about 500 feet more, I looked in horror as the same pickup truck came flying toward me and suddenly braked about 100 feet behind me. A man, about twice my age and bald, opened the passenger door and got out of the truck, carrying what looked like a hockey stick. I looked back and locked eyes with him. He gave me the most haunting and sinister look I've ever seen from a real person. He began to yell, "Get the fuck out of my sight or I'll fuck you up, mud slime." I'm of Indian origin and have brown skin, and mud slime was a racial slur directed towards Muslims.
Oh, if I was with her, I'd be like, what did you just call her, douchebag? No, that won't fly over with me. Bunch of mean old people in this world, I tell you.
As I was planning my escape, I remembered there was a wooded area between the park and my apartment. From where I was, I could cut across the park and go through the woods. Right across the woods was my apartment. This was a smart move because I had taken that shortcut during the day, and the truck wouldn't be able to follow me through the woods. Just as I ran towards those woods, I heard another yell in the distance. "Fuck off, asshole!" shouted another large man walking in the opposite direction on the sidewalk. I then saw this man walking towards me with a German Shepherd. The truck driver then started running at us with his hockey stick, and I made a run for it, darting towards the woods. Fortunately, the truck driver decided not to chase us and got back into his truck. I reached my apartment 5 minutes later. In the parking lot of my apartment, I happened to see the guy who was walking his dog. He looked like a rough bodybuilder type, so I was a little afraid of him too. However, we had a pleasant conversation. I headed up to my apartment and looked out my window. To my disgust and horror, I saw the black Chevy Silverado drive by my apartment and then leave. My friends came back home close to 3 a.m., just after I went to bed that night. Thankfully, I never saw that creep again, and I moved out of that apartment a few months later. After this incident, I avoid walking alone in dark, isolated areas at night.
I'm glad that girl got out of that apartment and did not have to face them creeps again. But that was just uncalled for, calling somebody a racial slur because of how they look. But not only that, when she moved out, she should have got the manager of that apartment building complex to see if they got any security camera footage of that truck going by. But anyway, that's going to be it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed my reaction to this new scary storyteller channel, Midnight Tales. And I'll be reacting to more of his videos in the future as well. So don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Midnight Tales scary story reactions. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I say that's a wrap, and have a nice day.